Yeah,
There we go.
Oh, you should have told me. I thought that I was on because I could hear myself very well, but apparently no. So okay, good, great. Yeah. Okay, back to what we were saying so far. So for folks at home, let me spend 1 second to see what I just said. Whoops. Yeah. So we're back in this example here, where we're selling either to Australia or the US, and both have for both I have the same marginal cost, so there is no difference. So if the demand curve that I was facing in the US and Australia were the same, then both countries' world market would be exactly identical. But they are not. So what I'm going to do is try to exploit my position. And there's a key thing I didn't say yet is, of course, how am I able to do that? Well, I'm able to do that because of this assumption here, no arbitrage. What is no arbitrage? Well, it's impossible for some consumer to buy it cheap and then sell it expensive to the other people. So how does that work internationally? Well, it works internationally because if you were somehow able to, by living in Australia, take a plane, go and buy your Elm table in the US cheap, and then take the plane back with your table to Australia with no cost whatsoever, then of course price discrimination couldn't work because that would be arbitrage. That would be a way to go around the limitations. So in here, IKEA has a very nice position because they know that transport costs are expensive, so you cannot do that. Plus, in many countries, you have other means of preventing arbitrage. So, for instance, I told you I lived in France for a while, and for a while I wanted to bring alcohol to France or from France to Canada, and every time there's limitations. So they know that if they don't put limitations, some people are just going to import however they like their alcohol, and they don't want to allow to do that. So yeah, so how does that work? Here it is. So imagine that okay, so can somebody tell me which market is Australia and which market is the US? Obviously, it's just A and B, but maybe you can use the letters to have some idea. B is what? Okay, good, nice try. So you had one chance over two. So no, A is Australia because of A, of course. No, in all seriousness, what matters is how people are able to avoid paying expensive prices, or how elastic is the demand curve. So you look at here, and this is an inelastic demand curve. So the more vertical it is, so the less the quantity changes. And the more horizontal it is, so the more elastic it is, and the more the quantity can change. So look at, so if we imagine this is the US, and this is Australia. So if I'm trying to sell to the United States, and so I'm selling, say, 36 units, and then I'm at $10, and I'm thinking, oh, I want to increase my price. What could go wrong? Well, I try to increase my price to 15, and almost nobody else wants to buy it. And I try to rise it to 20, and zero customers want to buy it. Why? because they have many alternatives in the US. So it just looks like I'm pretty much stuck with selling at a low price. So you see that I'm closer to perfect competition. And just a reminder, what would perfect competition look like? It would be perfectly horizontal. That's what life looks like for a perfectly competitive firm. So in the US, but every time it's always the same thing I'm doing is I'm choosing the quantity such that marginal revenue, which is this one, which is quite horizontal too, because the demand curve is horizontal, quite horizontal. So where it's equal to marginal cost, all right? And you can see that in Australia, well, it turns out that I have exactly the same marginal costs. Transportation cost is the same, furniture production is the same, but here the demand curve is quite steeper, and you see that the marginal revenue also is quite steeper. So if I pick marginal cost equals marginal revenue, yeah, exactly. So I'm at 20, and look at what price this corresponds to. This corresponds to 14. More or less. So I can sell very expensive furniture in Australia and very cheap furniture in the US. Makes sense? So that's what you would call sometimes third degree discrimination, but just call it like a different segment discrimination. And so here is a numerical representation of both situations, but so that's, I think it's pretty clear if you just look at the graph. Anyways, it's always the same. It's marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So, and in that case, you see that this happens. Oh, actually, they don't show marginal. Yeah, they don't show marginal revenue and marginal cost. Well, anyways, it happens at 36. Well, I don't know what these numbers are. Price, yeah, price makes sense. Okay. Yeah, price of 10 is the optimum and price of 14 is the optimum. All right, so they don't show, yeah, this is quantity. All right, okay. Price of 14 at quantity of 20, yeah, okay, it makes sense. But I wish they showed marginal revenue because that's the key thing. So marginal revenue would be somewhere in between the thing is with these discrete values, so it's always difficult because marginal revenue is a change from one number to the next. So it's always tricky to know, should I place it here or should I place it here, for instance? Yeah, so, so the graph is a very neat representation of it. All right, so that's this form of market price discrimination. Another one that's quite interesting too is called hurdle pricing. So it's always about, the game is always the same, is to put people in different buckets so as to somehow extract the most money out of the people who have the less ability to defend themselves against high prices. So what are hurdle prices? Well, you just put a lot of obstacles to for customers to overcome and get a lower price. So what is that? Well, it's, for instance, having discounts on some days or some weeks, and showing them in some advertisement that you post or you send by the mail. What are all these things? Well, all these things are for people who have a lot of time on their hand. So you may have, some of you may have seen the TV show in the US, Coupon King or Coupon Queen or something like that. Yes, no? Oh, anyways, it's a show about people who try, so it's like a contest, and their goal is to go to the grocery store and buy like for worth $1,000 of things, but pay as little as possible. And sometimes they get to pay zero. And how do they do that? So it looks magic. You're like, well, if I can buy, so people spend maybe a third of their budget on food. So if you can buy all your foods and home needs and spend $0, so that would be awesome. So how do they do that? Well, it turns out that it's a full-time job. So they have to find all of the coupons that they can find in the mail, in the newspaper, in all the places. They have huge binders of coupons, and then they just wait and wait and wait and wait. And when there's a big sale, then they strike, and then they go in there and they take like 4 cards and they fill in with so many things, and then they just have their binders of coupon at the end, and they pay with coupon, and they're able to do that. How do they do that? Well, they spend so long. So would I do that? Never, of course. So you have to be passionate about it. Actually, that's okay. If you want to get rich in life, here's my my advice to you: find something which makes you money, but especially that you're going to be passionate about. Because any activities, so many activities can make you money, but most people find some activity that makes them money, but they don't like it and they're miserable. But if you are like these people and you're just so thrilled about the prospect of going to the store and making a killer on your groceries, then that's life. That's purpose. So yeah. Anyway, so so what are these stores doing? These stores are saying, if you really care about low costs, then you have time to do it, and we're going to invite you to our store. But for the rest of us, they're putting us in a different bin, in the bin of people who have a life, who have something else to do with their time, and they just don't have time to go through all of these steps. So an economist that worked on that too is Alvarian. So what interested him is he went to the store one day and some item was quite cheap, and then he went a few days later and it was like 3 times as expensive as the first day. And he was asking himself, how can people pay 3 times as much? It was so cheap the 3 days before. But the thing is, people don't have the attention and the memory span to just memorize all these prices. Actually, I had a roommate once, and when I had a student, and sometimes I would just go to the store and he would say, no, but don't go to that store, go to Couche-Tard, and because for milk, it's a bit cheaper. I'm like, you know that? How do you know these things? I don't know. I just pick stuff and I hope for the best, and I hope I don't get ripped off. But yeah, if you have this disposition in your mind to just have all the prices in your head, then fine, you're going to be better off. Yeah, that's for coupons. Yeah, so I have some comments there. Yes, A is for Australia, of course. Yeah. Yeah, so just to finish, so the third I wanted to talk about is bundle discrimination. Or sometimes it's called second degree. If you see, these degrees is just how they're called in some textbooks, in case you look them up. Yeah, so let me have a bit some bigger font there. Yeah, so this is what was suggested last time. Club price and yeah, huge quantities. So what about this? Well, this is again to put people in different bin, and the goal is, so for if I'm, say, a restaurant, for instance, so I'm not going to sell a continuous quantity of food. I'm not going to say, if I'm McDonald's, I'm not going to sell. So I'm not going to ask the client, how many fries do you want? Oh, 200 and 10 fries, okay, so the price per fry is 1 cent. That's not how it works. You buy a bundle, you buy a menu. And so just with this information, you're able, again, to discriminate between different people. So how do you do that? Well, you know that if somebody is very hungry, then they're going to want to buy the big quantity. And for these people, you cannot charge them too much because it would be very expensive. But you know that for people who are not so hungry, then for them, it doesn't make sense to buy the huge bundle because anyways, they're going to leave half of it. So, or if you have kids, for instance, then they're not going to buy an adult menu. And also there's this social norm that you wouldn't like buy an adult menu and split it between 3 different kids. Although that would be quite cost effective to do that, but people don't do that normally. So they know that people are stuck. If they want just to buy a small quantity, they cannot buy the big one and store it. If they could, then it would be fine. Again, they could just buy the big bundle. But if they buy just the small bundle, then okay, I can charge them more. So there are 2 things that you have to care about. First, that the adult buy the adult bundle, the kid buy the kid bundle, and that the kid doesn't want to buy the adult bundle and the adult doesn't want to buy the kid bundle. So you have all of these things to take into account when you decide the right quantity to sell them. But if you do it right, then you can sell a very small quantity at a super high price because you know that people are going to stick to their segment or their bundle. One other interesting situation of this illustration of this is airplanes. Airplane seats. Yeah, so restaurants. Or airplane seats. So how does that work? Well, if you want to, so generally airplanes, they make like, I'm not exactly sure what the ratio is, but they make about 1/3 of their money on first class, 1/3 of their money on business class, and 1/3 of their money on economy, more or less. What matters is how much space they devote to each section. So if you're selling first class tickets, so you want to sell at the outrageously expensive plane ticket. So of course you offer champagne and a nice bed and stuff, but at some point it's a plane, there's limited thing you can do. But you really want the person to accept to pay this high price. So what are your constraints? Well, first you have to give them something good enough. But second constraint, you have to make sure that the person who would buy first class doesn't look at the business class and tell themselves, oh, well, you know, business class is like half the price, so and it's almost as good, so let's buy business class. So no. So what can you do if giving such a good service to first class is very expensive for you? Well, what you can do also is make business class not as good. So you make business class sort of okay, but not great. And again, you have to convince business class people to actually buy this ticket and not take economy class. Otherwise, they would all take economy class. So what do you have to do? Well, you cannot make business class better because then first class people are going to buy it. What's the solution? Somebody knows? Exactly, you make the economy class as bad as possible. So that means that if we had a whole plane for economy class, things wouldn't be that bad. So you would have some space for your legs, the food would be sort of decent, but it's not how it works. Now you have to make economy class intentionally worse so that business people don't have in their mind the idea that they could buy economy class and it wouldn't be that bad. So for most of us, I'm sure we have mostly traveled in economy class. So that's life for you of plane travel. So that's again bundle discrimination. So there are many nice models with bundle discrimination. So, but yeah, it's for another day. Okay. Consequences of price discrimination. So do you remember what happened to efficiency when we have a monopoly? Is it good or is it bad for efficiency?
It's bad for efficiency.
Yeah, it's bad for efficiency. So I'm just going to remind you of that. Here it is. So this is what we would get in perfect competition. We would get this all consumer surplus and this all producer surplus. But then the monopoly doesn't produce QC, it produces QM. And there are these two regions there, which is essentially the deadweight loss. Did I write it? Yeah, deadweight loss is B plus C. All right, so this is pure loss for the economy. But what happens now if I'm able to discriminate? Somebody have an idea? So let's consider first degree discrimination or perfect price discrimination. So imagine I could sell each unit at a different price. Then would that make things better or worse?
Make things the same.
The same as what? As monopoly or the same as?
The same as if you did price discriminate, if you were able to sell each unit at the price that you want to sell them at, are you actually increasing efficiency because these people want to spend that money and you want to receive that money, and it's every price is being matched, so it increases efficiency.
Yes, exactly. First degree price discrimination is perfectly efficient, is as efficient as perfect competition. So let me just show you briefly how that looks. All right, so if I have perfect competition, let's say I'm something like this with my demand curve, and then I have some supply curve like this. Then just to prove you that this is the same, I'm just going to copy paste exactly. All right, so these two are identical. And perfect competition, what situation would I get? I would get some market price where demand equals supply. And then this will be my consumer surplus. And this would be my producer surplus. All right. And now I'm in perfect competition. And this I have first degree price discrimination. And now as a firm, I'm able to sell to each and every customer their own personalized price. So I'm really catering to everyone's needs perfectly by setting them the exact price that makes them indifferent between buying and not buying. So for the first person, I'm saying at that price. And of course, my marginal cost is this. So my whole surplus is this whole distance between demand and supply. And same thing for the second unit, third unit, fourth unit. So in the end, what is my producer surplus? It's just everything. So here I have producer surplus, consumer surplus, producer surplus. So first degree is perfectly efficient. So it's perfectly efficient because I'm not going to I don't have, if I want to sell a super high price to these people, I don't have to hike the price for these people. So that's the key for a monopolist that has a single price. They have this trade-off. They have to, if they want to increase the price for some people, they have to sacrifice the service of some other people. Here, they can just have a personal experience for everybody and sell them at a outrageously high price for everybody. And then they capture all of the surplus. So all the surplus is captured by the monopolist. So that's why on the internet, every time you go to a new website, they say, oh, by the way, do you want us to put cookies on your browser? Why do they do that? Well, of course, that's data that they would really like to have a better profile on you and know exactly what price they can charge you when you go to buy stuff on Amazon or other things. So the more information they have on you, then the better they are, better they are. Yeah, so, and this is first degree price discrimination, but in general, most of, any sort of discrimination is mostly good for efficiency. It's not good for consumers, of course, but it's good for shareholders of monopolists. And economists, we care a lot about efficiency. So we're not too mad about the price discrimination. If, for instance, some poor people would not have had access to the product before because the prices would have been too high, but now you're somehow able to give them some I don't know, some coupon or some discount based on their circumstances, and now they can buy the stuff. So it's difficult to say really that things are worse than they would be with a single price monopolist, for instance. Of course, perfect competition is always better, and we're going to see in the next chapter why this is. So in general, a monopolist that price discriminates among units will produce more output than single price monopolist. We say in general, or I say in general, because so it depends exactly on which type of discrimination you have, which model you have. But yeah, in general, that's what happens. So yeah, the total output is generally bigger when production is larger, yeah, and the outcome is more efficient. Yes, thank you, Mike. All right, so am I done? Yeah, I'm done with this chapter. Questions? No? All right. Next chapter. So we still are in the imperfect competition world. Now we just add a bit more firms in the game. So these firms are going to somehow compete, but are going to be able still to capture some extra profit based on the fact that competition is not perfect. And we have two models. One is oligopoly and one is monopolistic competition. Those are related but different, so you have to keep that in mind. Monopolistic competition is maybe a bit more complicated than oligopoly. Usually we see oligopoly first. But yeah, since this is an introductory course where we study it in a very simple way, we introduce notions of game theory that are always fun, and that can be quite easy to grasp. But first we start with describing a bit stuff that's going on with Canadian industries. All right, so Canada's output is largely produced in industry where firms are small. So we have small and medium firms, or PME in French. So so that's a big part of Canadian industries, but some segment of the industry has, on the other hand, very, very large firms that control most of it. So these firms are obviously not perfectly competitive, because 3 or 4 or 5 is not an infinite number. And the perfectly competitive model explains the behavior of individual price-taking firms, so small firms, but monopolistic competition and oligopoly explains why there are, monopolistic competition also is a case in which you have many firms, but each firm somehow has some market power. We're going to see how they can get that. So about 1/3 of Canada's total output is produced in the industries dominated by either a small firm or few large firms. So so this other theory of oligopoly, helps us understand industries in which there are large firms in small numbers that have considerable market power. Obviously, that's considerable market power because they are a small number of firms, but also they have a large number of clients. If you had a small number of firms and small number of clients, that's a different situation. And these are very good examples. So groceries, life insurance, rail industry. Oops. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. All right. Yeah, as I was saying, so why are these industries good examples? So because they are relatively homogeneous goods. So, oh man. So in the case of monopolistic competition, I'm back to the previous slide, you're going to see that the goods are not exactly homogeneous. So yes, it's all about branding and all about making your product a bit different from your competitors. Here, it's really what's the big difference between the, say, groceries, a Metro store or a Provigo store or IGA store? Yes, they somehow they feel different. They might have some price differences, but more or less they sell the same sort of product. Like life insurance too, life insurance is life insurance, so you need one, and you're good to go. Railway industry, so yeah, all the railway is quite bad in Canada, so it's not. Yeah, so I would say it's good for transporting goods, but for transporting people, go to Germany or Japan, that's much better, or Switzerland. Yeah, so, and this is important for the models we're going to see, so that to have identical goods. Okay, so just first of all, industrial concentration. So that's just a way to more or less decide which industry is which. So is an industry populated with a small number of large firms or a large number of small firms? So they have this measure of concentration ratio, which is, yeah, the ratio of sales by a specific number of the largest firms. So if it's, say, four, like in the next one. So I'm just going to go to the next one, yeah. So here they use top 4 firms. So if the top 4 firms sell 100% of the products in your industry, then you know it's a oligopoly. But if the top small firms sell a very small fraction of the total sales in the industry, then you know, oh, this is quite small actually. Yeah. Then you know that this is closer to perfect competition or to a monopolistic competition. Yeah. So it looks like the one that is most concentrated is petroleum and coal. So you know what's the largest firm that operates in the petroleum industry in Canada? You may have heard it in the news sometimes. They distribute, but they don't like extract. So largest is what? Yeah, so that's aluminum. So largest is, whoops. It's Enbridge. So if next time you hear about them in the news, yeah, so they have revenue is 50 billion. Canadian dollars. Yeah, so I think they are like maybe 30% of the market or something, and they have like 2-3 others that are very large too. But that was a trick question. There is an even larger firm, or not firm, but entity that works in the petroleum industry in Canada. You know what is? Thanks to Justin Trudeau a few years ago. Yeah, no, the federal government. So yeah, the federal government, they bought a pipeline. We are all, we are all owners of a pipeline by being citizens of Canada and paying taxes. Yeah, so it's the Trans Mountain pipeline. So they bought it because they wanted the projects to go through. But still, they are having a lot of problems with it, and with indigenous people not wanting a pipeline on their land, which I can perfectly well understand. And of course, the Canadian government has a much larger budget. I think it's 330 billion or something. Yeah, but in all the seriousness, the largest is Enbridge. But that still highlights one thing, is that what this assumes is that it's always possible to perfectly put every firm in one nice, neat bucket. Is that really the case? That's complicated because more often than not, one big firm is going to probably have activities in many of these categories. So it's not always easy to see, yeah, maybe about 30% of that firm is in that sector or that sector. So what I'm saying is empirical work is always has a art part to it. So you have to make choices when you classify things. So things are not perfectly, yeah. So one problem. firms in various sectors. Yeah. But still, it's a neat first look at what is concentrated. So beverage and tobacco products is quite concentrated. So if you actually we have to create some very large category that encompasses many different smaller things because we have firms that sell so many different beverage and tobacco products. Yeah, and you see these are quite smaller. So again, here the measure is this. So yeah, it's quite it can be small to look at it. So I'm just going to highlight it. So this is what they show there. Right. Okay. All right, so market structures, we're going to, oh, what time is it now? Okay, right, half an hour. Market structures we're going to study are called imperfectly competitive because as with monopoly, we don't have a case where price equals marginal cost equals the minimum of the average costs. So things are not going to be perfectly efficient. Still, they are not as inefficient as a single price monopoly, but so it's more or less in between. So word competitive emphasizes that we are not dealing with monopoly, but imperfectly emphasizes that we're not dealing with perfect competition. So it's somewhere in between. So, so you could see these two as two extremes, and now we're dealing with many interesting instances of yeah, things that are right in the center of these two. So characteristics of the imperfectly competitive firm. So firm differences. So this is, yeah, monopolistic competition. Not oligopoly. So yeah, this reminded, every time you have differentiated products, then you're dealing with monopolistic competition, not oligopoly. And so what kind of firms do we have here? Well, we have most of the firms you know about, most of the brands you know about. So think about anything like, I don't know, cereals or cars or whatever is meant to be consumed by average consumers. So what are these firms trying to do there? So as we've seen, the best case scenario for a firm, what everybody aspires if you start a business is to be a monopolist. Because if you're a monopolist, it means you have a huge profit and you're very happy and very rich. But the problem is when you're facing competition. So the goal of everybody is being a monopolist. The problem is, of course, that people can always enter your market, copy you. So if you are trying to have some new business in a very crowded market, what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish there? Well, you're going to try and create some new brand that's going to be almost the same as the others, but you're going to try to convince the consumers that it's just so different and it's so much better than the rest, and you really should buy it. Yeah, it's a bit more expensive, but you're going to be so much happier if you buy it. So that's the goal there. And then on this small new product, it's like your own little personal market. It's a market where the demand is super elastic. It's like the IKEA case in the United States. Their demand is very elastic, so they cannot hike the price so much because so if you try and sell your cereal brand 3 times as more expensive as the other brands, then nobody's going to want to buy it because cereal is more or less cereals anyways. Especially since, yeah, you have, even in cereal brands, you have like, I don't know, Cheerios, and then you have some other no-name brand that copies exactly the same shape and it's just identical, almost. So your situation is you're facing with a very elastic demand curve, but still you're a monopolist in this small market of yours. Yeah, so it's essentially what we're saying when we're calling when we're talking about differentiated product is a group of products that are similar enough to be called the same product, so all cereals, but dissimilar enough that all of them do not have to be sold at exactly the same price. Obviously, it's not exactly the same price, but it's quite close. Yeah, so here's the cereal case. So yeah, you have, what's the big difference between shredded, this one, and the crisp, that one? So they have the same sort of small rectangles inside. So yeah, it's pretty much the same. So what happens for demand? So you have a very, so monopoly, monopoly with very elastic demand. So that would look like this, for instance. And then again, if you have your very elastic demand, so you also have your very elastic marginal revenue. So this would be marginal revenue. This would be demand. All right. So you're trying to be a monopolist, but you see that your market power is very limited. So you do your best, but still, yeah. Life is good cereal, though. I like them. All right. So that's all of these things are, so yeah, especially consumer products, cars, food, etc. Yeah, so whenever different firms' products are not identical, then each firm must decide on a price to set. But yeah, if you go to the store, most cereals cost more or less the same because the goods look more or less the same. So, but they could choose their own price, and if you put some better ingredients in them, then it's a bit more. You can sell it at a higher price. So we are going to say that these are price setters because they face a downward sloping demand curve for its product. But so it's very shallow downward sloping. It's almost horizontal, but yeah, they are a price setter on their small market segment. All right, so it chooses which price to set. So imperfectly competitive firms typically engage in behavior that is absent in either monopoly or perfect competition. So they spend, or I would say, or oligopoly. Because they have to spend a lot of energy convincing you that they are just so different. So if you buy the Fructis shampoo with stem cells in it, your life is going to be awesome. you're going to be in nirvana of consumption. So yeah, they spend tons of money on firms. So yeah, on advertisement, sorry, too. They engage in a variety of forms of non-price competition, such as offering competing standards of quality, product guarantees. They may engage in activity that appear to hinder the entry of new firms, which prevents the erosion of existing profit. So they may say something like, yes, but my competitor's product is bad for some other reason. Yeah, so great example of all of these is cars. So sometimes I don't know, but when I turn on, I don't watch TV all that much, but sometimes I go to my parents' place and they have TV on. Sometimes it looks like half of the advertisement is just cars, 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 cars. So that's just amazing. So very large number of ads on TV. So does advertisement work? So if I ask each and every one of you, you're all going to say, no, 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 I don't care. I don't watch ad and it doesn't influence me. Am I right? Of course, that's the case for me too. So each of us in this room, we're perfectly rational and informed people and we don't care about ads, but those other people out there, maybe they're influenced by it. So the economist argument is so if they spend money on it, it must be working. So that's anytime you see something happening, you see something doing stuff, somebody doing something, then your first instinct must not be that person is crazy. Your first instinct must be there has to be a reason, because we're rational people and firms, we hopefully are rational too. So if they advertise, then it must work. But I have a counterexample. You know which firm does not advertise and yet they're doing quite well? Yeah, Tesla. And quite well. Yeah, so I think they almost doubled their revenues last year, in 2021, or they increased it very, very, very much. So yeah, and it's just word of mouth. It's just having some very good product and just saying, oh, we're just going to wait for people to come. And plus they have their CEO that tweets like 10 times a day, so that helps too. It's like free advertisement. But yeah, they do, it works well. But I have some other case too where it might not always work. So there's there's a good economist in Chicago called Stephen Levitt. Maybe have you heard of him or no? Yeah, so he's written a book. Free economics, yes, free economics. So based on his work and some interesting. He does some all sort of quirky research on interesting topics like cheating in sumo wrestling or prostitution or crime, or many different things. And yeah, so he tells that once he went to yeah, there was some firm that was advertising all over the United States and selling everywhere. And then they asked him, so please tell us, is it worth it to advertise or not? We would really like to know because it costs us a lot of money. We always have these pages in the newspapers and stuff. And every single year and every single month we have these advertisements. So he says, well, okay, I don't know. Are you sure you do it all the time? He says, well, all the time, except this 1 month at this one place, somebody forgot to send the advertisement. But otherwise, we always do it. So he said, oh, that's interesting. So what happened at this one place at this 1 month? That's the way you can know what is the impact of something, is when you manipulate somehow the conditions, and then what happened to the sale at that time. And he looked at it, and lo and behold, the sales were exactly the same. So no impact of advertisement. So does that mean that advertisement has no impact? Maybe not, because maybe the effect is quite cumulative. So for instance, if you ask yourself, oh, what should I don't know, what brand of car should I buy? So already something pops up in your head. So even if you haven't seen a Volkswagen ad in the last month, still you know the brand, and you pretty much know that you have to consider this. So that's so that's why we say that the goal is to hinder the entry of new firms. The goal is to essentially make it hard for somebody to become part of people's mind, because you just have so many things to think about. And then if you know this brand, it's sort of synonymous with being quality, even though that's not always the case. Plus, you're sure if you buy it, then you're buying the advertisement as well. All right. So, yeah, so now we go more deep in the more detail, distinguishing monopolistic competition and small number of large firms like oligopoly. So the key difference is the amount of strategic behaviors displayed by a firm. Oh yeah, by the way, so here the advertisement and the brand is the way to be a monopolist. So I cannot copy exactly. So even though something like Louis Vuitton is very good brand and people are ready to pay a lot, I cannot be some counterfeiter in China and just say I'm going to copy Louis Vuitton and sell it. So that's illegal because they have their brand and it's protected. So that's how they are being monopolist. So that's how they're in a monopolistic competition. In oligopoly, though, it's like the monopoly before. So we just assume that there's some reason why some other firms don't enter the market, even though it's a market that sells a uniform product. All right, so let's go ahead and continue this. So monopolistic competition was originally developed to deal with the phenomenon of product differentiation. So it's developed by Edward Chamberlain in 1933. So you may think it's old stuff, but oligopoly, the theory, was developed in the 19th century. So that's pretty old. So some economic theory is quite old. So here's his model. So you have many firms, freedom of entry and exit on the market. So that's a crucial difference. And the product is, as we said, somehow differentiated from others. And firms have some control over their own price. But to make things simple, we're just going to assume that most firms are the same, so they're going to end up selling at the same price. But we don't study the whole market. We're just going to study one single firm. That's enough. So each firm produces its own version of the industry's differentiated product. Thus, it faces a demand curve that, although negatively sloped, is highly elastic, as we have shown. Oh, yeah. Because competing firms produce many close substitutes, all firms have access to the same technology, and so they have the same cost curves. So it pretty much looks like a perfect competition because firms can copy each other. They have the same technology. All that's different is the packaging. So one package is written Western bread and the other is written low blast bread or some other brand of bread, but it's the same. And they essentially they could be produced at the same factory. You could just say have the bread that's goes out there, and then there's one side that goes to Western bread and the other goes to some other brand of bread, and they're essentially the same. All firms have access to, so as I said, the industry contains so many firms that each one ignores the competitors when making price and output decisions. So that's also, as opposed to oligopoly, where you have some sort of then when you have very little number of firms in your industry, like your Enbridge, for instance, then you care very much about what others in your industry do and how your own action is going to affect their decision and retroactively. So you can see how things can become quite complicated when you have a small number of actors. Here we have a very large number of actors, so they just really don't care all that much. Yes, and firms are free to enter and exit the industry as willing. So that's also as opposed to oligopoly. So here's what's going to happen. So this is the short run. Yeah. So it's exactly the same as monopoly, so no different. So so what do you do? Well, you have the demand curve, the only, but the thing is, but with elastic demand. So you have your elastic demand, and then you have your elastic marginal revenue. That's a function of your demand. Why is it still lower than the demand? That's because if you sell more, you get the price that you for selling these extra product, but also you have to decrease a bit your price. So that's exactly like the monopoly case, and then you sell exactly the same point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and you see that you make some small profit there, which is the difference between the sales price PS and the short run average total cost. Yeah, so right. Yeah, so that's what you do in the short run, same decision as a monopolist. So you can read all this text. It just explains what this is. But so any questions about this? No, so it's yeah, it's no. If you understood the monopoly case, it's the same really. And then the long run. So in the long run, again, you have the market demand, which is the same, marginal revenue, which is the same, but yeah, it looks a bit more steeper than, in my opinion, it should be anyways. So that's a long run. And this is long run average cost. So what do we see? Well, we see that, so again, what you're doing is choosing marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So same as before, here it's marginal cost, considering that you can vary all of your costs. So it's in the long run, so you can adjust no fixed cost. Can adjust all inputs. Yeah, and where is this market going? So this is the key thing to consider, is if you remember in perfect competition, what happens in the long run. So as we said, firms are free to enter the market and leave the market as they want. So if they make profit, the other competitors are going to enter the market, so profits are going to go down. If they make losses, then firms are going to exit the market, because banks are not going to pay them forever to try and compete, since they lose money. And it's going to shift back the supply curve left, and left from your perspective. So, and again, it's going to make profits larger. So in the long run, you know that the market price has to be equal to the long run average cost. So because the profit that firms make is the price minus the average cost multiplied by the quantity sold. So what does that look if we have a perfectly competitive industry? It looks like this. So this would be the case with, so PC is price competition, price with perfect competition. And we have the situation in which the long run average cost crosses the marginal cost, crosses the market price exactly at the same point. That's the long run situation when there is no profit. But so what's the difference with here? Well, the difference is that we don't have a perfectly elastic demand curve. It's slightly inelastic. But it also always has to be the case that in the long run, firms in monopolistic competition can enter and create a new brand or leave the market and fail with their new brand. So the market price in the long run always has to be equal to the long run average cost too. So where does that happen? It happens exactly at this point there. So at this point represents the size of the firm in the monopolistic competition. And as you can see, it doesn't happen at the minimum of the longer run average cost. It happens a bit earlier. So it means that essentially the scale of the firms are a bit different from what they would be in perfect competition. So that's the big difference, is that the long run situation doesn't happen at the minimum of the long run average cost, but slightly before, and this is due to the fact that the demand curve is slightly downward sloping. But other than that, that's the same. So you get QL, which is quantity long run for the monopolistic competition. QC would be the quantity in perfect competition. All right, that makes sense. Oh, I have some. Yes, in the long run, all firms have zero economic profits. So they're free to enter, free to leave the market. Okay, so we're mostly out of time for today. So I'm just going to restart here next time, and we're going to continue to oligopoly. So thanks a lot and have a nice weekend.